them, and CBC is working to confirm the details with this. An RCMP say a 57-year-old woman has been found dead after her home was washed away by a mudslide in Coquitlam Saturday afternoon. This slide along Quarry Road was triggered by that torrential rain that we saw in BC's south coast this weekend. Coquitlam RCMP say search and rescue found that body on Sunday evening, and police say the woman's family has been notified. And in Port Alberni, officials confirm one person has died after a washout on the road to Bamfield. Port Alberni RCMP received two separate missing persons reports Saturday along the Sarita River. The family of the person located their truck submerged in the river, and due to that fast flowing water and darkness, at first emergency services weren't able to find the missing driver, but the deceased was eventually located a short distance away. Then a second vehicle was also found in the river, and officials believe the second missing person is inside, and they're continuing with those search and rescue efforts hopefully today. And with all that rain, and a handful of properties in the North Shore were ordered to evacuate, and a state of local emergency was declared on Sunday in that Deep Cove area. The District of North Vancouver says the evacuation affects 6 homes on Panorama Drive. The North Shore Fire Department says they received hundreds of calls for help and no one was injured.
Between the hours of 6 in the morning and 2:30 that afternoon, the 3 North Shore departments received over 300 calls. Wow. For assistance, of which we had to prioritize and respond to, and really just do our best to protect public safety. And I'm happy to say that there were no injuries or fatalities that occurred because of this event.
Residents who have been evacuated are able to receive emergency support services, and they have been temporarily relocated. Well, the BC election is not over yet. The final results of BC's razor-thin election may not be known until October 28th. And regardless of which party will form that next government, the BC Conservatives came away with a strong showing. They are leading or elected in 45 ridings, and BC Conservative leader John Rustad spoke to the early edition this morning.
Should we end up in a situation where there's a minority government of the NDP that is in power in British Columbia, if they're carrying forward with the policies that they are promising to do, which have brought so much destruction and pain in this province, especially to our resource sector in British Columbia, then no, I cannot support that, and I will try to bring their government down at the earliest possible opportunity.
So these close results means the race will come down to the final polls out of district votes and those mail-in ballots. And there's a new tool online where people can share their personal stories of connections to different places in Surrey, and it hopes to provide a snapshot of the city's diverse history through interactive maps and memories.
People are welcome to take a look at the city's map, point out places that have been really important to them, to their friends, their family, their neighborhood, or their community group.
And those are your headlines today. I'm Benita Brach. You're watching CBC News BC. BC Today is up next.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. The BC election was tense. It was tight, so tight that it's still inconclusive. So what now? What's your reaction to the BC election? How do you feel about that razor-thin margin between the NDP and the Conservatives? You can call us on the open line, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or just hit pound 690. Our email, bctoday@cbc.ca. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. It was a hard-fought election. The winner, still unclear. The NDP are leading or elected in 46 seats, the Conservatives right behind with 45, both just short of the 47 seats required for a majority government. The BC Greens were elected in 2. Based on preliminary results, CBC News has not projected the winners of 11 ridings, with the NDP leading in 6 of those and the Conservatives in 5. Those ridings have a margin of under 2% between the two parties. And Elections BC says a final tally will take place from October 26th to the 28th. So this weekend, you have to wait a bit. We're asking you, what is your reaction to Saturday's election? How do you feel about that margin, razor thin, between the NDP and the Conservatives? Call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email us too, bctoday@cbc.ca. Conservative leader John Rustad spoke this morning on CBC, and he told Stephen Quinn on the early edition how his party will respond to the final results, whatever they may be.
My hope is, come Saturday, that the Conservative Party will have the opportunity to form a government.
Of course.
That's my hope. And so we'll see what comes out of that. Should we still be in the minority situation, we will be looking and working with other MLAs, Green Party or others, to look at an opportunity to be able to govern in this province. Should we end up in a situation where there's a minority government of the NDP that is in power in British Columbia, if they're carrying forward with the policies that they are promising to do, which have brought so much destruction and pain in this province, especially to our resource sector in British Columbia, then no, I cannot support that, and I will try to bring their government down at the earliest possible opportunity.
Okay, and so in the meantime, though, if you do not get the votes, do you plan to court the Green Party to try to get them on side so you can govern?
Well, there's clearly lots of differences between the Green Party platform and the Conservative Party platform. So, however, there are some things that we could find in terms of common ground. So we're going to be open to having conversations. We haven't blocked off any sort of ideas, whether that's working with the Green Party or others.
We have requested an interview with David Eby today, and we're told he's not doing interviews today. We are taking your calls on this, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, your reaction. And let's just quickly go to Chris in Vancouver. Hi, Chris.
Hi, hello.
Yeah, what are your thoughts? Hi, Chris, go ahead. What's your reaction to the election?
I'm mainly concerned about housing and transit. There are two outcomes that are possible here. It's either going to be a coalition with the Greens or it's going to be some kind of conservative government, right?
Okay, and so how do you feel about that? How do you feel about where we are right now?
Well, I reckon, obviously, the NDP has done a lot on housing. We have the laneway bill, and the TOD bill, especially in Metro Vancouver. But the problem is that the Conservatives want to take that away. And I'm not sure what they're going to replace it with. I don't think it'll be as effective.
Okay, and go ahead.
My main fear is that if the Conservatives were to be in charge, housing prices might go back up again. Obviously, rents have slowly but steadily come down, but I'm really hoping that trend doesn't bounce back up.
So what would happen to the housing policies that the NDP government had put in before the election?
So Rustad has promised to repeal the laneway bill and the TOD bill because supposedly it makes it's too authoritarian to the municipalities, but you can argue that the municipalities originally themselves were quite authoritarian when it comes to over-regulating the housing. So
Right.
we're
What
in
they're
kind of
saying is the provincial government being too authoritarian with them in this case.
Yes.
Right.
So we're in kind of the strange spot where the NDP has actually had less regulation in housing, and the Conservatives are trying to bring it back.
Okay.
Right.
Well, Chris,
And
I'm going to jump in. Thank you very much. But your concerns there about what would happen then? Would it be a rolling back of those housing strategies? Where would BC go, and what would replace it? Thanks so much for your call. We're going to take more of your calls now. Your reaction to the election results in British Columbia: 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Right now, let me introduce our guests who can kind of take us through what the possibilities are. As Chris was saying, here are the scenarios that I expect. Neither party winning a majority. We have been here before. The 2017 election saw the NDP winning 41 seats, the incumbent BC Liberals 43. Oh, it's all coming back to me. The Greens took 3 seats, and they agreed to go into a confidence and supply agreement with the NDP, which of course went on to form government. And here we are, fast forward to 2024. So to help us compare the two scenarios and what kind of wheeling and dealing might be happening right now, we're joined by Rob Shaw. He's a political reporter for Czech News, a columnist with Radio West and All Points West, and he's co-author of A Matter of Confidence, the inside story of the political battle for BC. Rob is with me in studio. Hello.
Hello.
Very nice to meet you in person.
You too.
Okay, election night. It was a long one this past Saturday. Tense, uncertain. And what stood out for you?
Well, I mean, it was, I guess, confirmation that there is such a thing as a conservative wave. We'd been wondering whether these conservative voters were real, if they were going to bother to vote. They did, in fact, vote, and they pushed a massive kind of wave through the Fraser Valley and Abbotsford and Mission, through the Chilliwack, through Langley's, into the start of Maple Ridge, took over a lot of Surrey, and they pushed what was the NDP kind of wave from 2020,
That's right.
2017 back. And so now they've kind of pressured the NDP down into a Metro Vancouver, Burnaby kind of focus, and Southern Vancouver Island, and that's it. And that is takes us more back to where we were in 2017.
What are there any kind of postmortems happening with the campaigns right now? What might be going through their minds?
Well, there should be, but I think they're waiting to see what this
The final
recount
tally.
and final tally might be first. But there are lessons to learn in every election, and usually there are postmortems that are done.
What were the lessons learned in 2017? Can you compare the two scenarios for us?
Well, you know, the 2017 election was won by the BC Liberals, and they still basically were defeated because they failed to get the support of the Greens, and the NDP plus the Greens were able to outvote them. It's important to remember in this scenario that occurred then and occurs now, the Premier's still the Premier,
Yes.
the government's still the government. They get the first chance to test the confidence of the House. So David Eby is the government, he is the Premier. He gets a chance to go into the legislature and court the Greens, whether they sign a deal before that, a confidence and supply agreement or a coalition government or something like that, or they just start doing it bill by bill on the floor of the House. It's his shot. And so people thinking that even if the Conservatives were to win a couple ridings in the recount, David Eby could still go in the legislature and try to make this work. And that is what happened in 2017. Christy Clark tried, failed. Went to the lieutenant governor,
Test
said,
the
I've
confidence, yeah.
failed. Let's call another election. And the lieutenant governor said, nope, it's too soon to the last election. We're going to let the other party try to govern. So there's a lot of conventions and sort of rules around there we can get into if we want, how it might play out. But right now, it's the NDP's shot to make this work.
Adam Olsen, who is the retiring Green MLA, was on the early edition this morning, and he said, you know, his phone has been buzzing. He said it wasn't necessarily the leaders of the parties, but his phone has been buzzing. Are people making phone calls today?
Sure they are. And I think the Greens are waiting again to see the results. I think we're actually kind of we're all talking about this and we're really excited, but there's kind of almost a little pause here. People are exhausted. They're taking down their campaign signs. When I talk to MLAs, they're out there with their trucks taking their campaign signs down, wrapping up their campaign offices. The 2 new Green MLAs are starting their constituency offices. They like this break. They want to wait until Elections BC does the recount. So the low-key talks are happening, especially between the NDP and Greens, but no deals yet.
Okay, we are. In fact, I was told that Sonia Furstenau wasn't doing interviews this week until the final tally was coming in.
And she's still leader, even though she lost her
Of
seat.
the Green Party, yeah. Do you think that's going to continue?
I think there's a possibility that it might. You don't have to be elected to be the leader of a political party. You can do different things. She brings experience. The 2 Green MLAs are rookies. She'd be a valuable leader with experience, especially from the last agreement between the NDP and Greens in 2017.
Let's take a call. We're taking your reaction this hour on BC Today to the election. How do you feel about the uncertainty right now, about that margin, very razor thin between the NDP and the BC Conservatives? It's really, in the popular vote is like 1.1% or something like that. Let's take a call from Stephen in Souk. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, how are you today?
Very well. What are your thoughts?
Well, it strikes me that we've become very polarized in our society. And on the one hand, on the right of the spectrum, that polarization is translated into a coalition, if you like. All the right wing, that they're all together under one umbrella, one party, and so their votes are concentrated, and they did very well. On the left, we've got the NDP and we've got the Greens, and they're not united because they have differences, obviously. If they were united, and for that matter, if the Greens united with the Conservatives or the Greens united with the NDP, it would have been a complete landslide for whichever party had that support. I think it's time for the left to just say, you know what, we have to get together as the people on the left so that the voters have a very clear decision to make. Because right now it's kind of muddy. It looks like it's really close, but actually the Greens got 23% of the vote. So that's significant.
Well, yeah, when you look at Vernon Lumby, there really was a spoiler there from the Greens, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in fact, if you look on the website for CBC or for CTV, they have a list that shows those ridings that were within 1% or those ridings that were within 5%. And if you go into each individual riding, you will see that the Green Party, if it had sided one way or the other, it didn't matter which way they went, that would have decided that riding. And that was probably, and I bet that's true in most of the ridings in the province. So I think the left has to get together. Now, of course, the Greens, they're going to be a little bit leery because the last time we had a situation like this, John Horgan made a deal with the Greens, and then John Horgan broke that deal and called an election. In addition, John Horgan, going into that 2020 election, said, you don't need to vote for the Greens. We will protect the old growth forest. And they didn't.
Stephen, thank you very much for the call. Okay, so some interesting points there on what the Greens may do, but he talked about the right of centre parties, and so did the BC United Kevin Falcon's action to fold up that campaign and throw his support behind the Conservatives. Did that pay off then?
Well, yes and no. You mentioned Vernon Lumby. I mean, Kevin Acton, I believe, is the candidate there, who's an independent candidate, who was a BC United candidate, ran as an independent, picked up thousands of votes. Without him, the Conservatives could have won that riding. So the way that BC United folded, the way Kevin Falcon yanked everyone's nomination papers without consulting them, the way many people continued to run as independents, including the 5 MLAs in caucus, none of whom were re-elected, but they still pulled thousands of votes. That didn't work out for the Conservatives, and the Conservatives mishandled it by not taking some of those United candidates and choosing to keep their own, and in result losing some ridings. Your caller's point about merging the left. I mean, the left is separate for a reason. The Greens and the NDP have very different policies on resource development, on environmental protection, on the future of fossil fuels and natural gas and jobs and generating. They are separate for a reason. I don't think it's as easy as it sounds to just tell Green voters, stick with the NDP. They've separated off and they've carved out their own space and their own platform in the legislature that's very different from the NDP.
Yeah, we had Sonia First to Know here the week of the election, and one of our callers asked her that, why not just work with the NDP? And she said, if you look at it, they're actually, from her perspective, closer to the Conservatives. She just said they were in fact not very similar. That was her response. I'm going to put out the numbers again: 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or hit #690, asking you for your reaction to to the election, the provincial election on Saturday. Still no clear result as to which party is going to govern. And you can give us a call, let us know about that. What do you think of this very thin margin between the two, and even in the popular vote? So what does that say about where British Columbians are right now? We heard from someone saying that just means we are so polarized. So let us know what you think about that, and how you feel about the political landscape in British Columbia. 604-669-3733 is the local number. And so, Rob, we heard John Rustad say, my first opportunity, I'm going to try and get into an election. Are we headed into another election?
Well, your caller had a good point there, that because the last confidence and supply agreement between the Greens and the NDP was set for 4 years and the NDP tore it up at 3 years, the Greens are going to be hesitant to sign another 4-year deal. And even when they partner together, if they do and the results stay the same, they're only like 1 vote, 2 vote, probably 1 vote threshold. They have to name a speaker. That doesn't keep a parliament functioning for 4 years. So we are looking at a year, 2 years, I think, is at the outset, depending on how this goes, depending on what agreement the Greens want. The Lieutenant Governor, and we discovered this in 2017, does not want to call another election within a kind of, and this is all very sort of fluid, it's not written down, within a sort of 6-month-ish window, because that's elections by fatigue. She wants to let one party leader try and then the other party leader try. But if the David Eby government was to get Green support for a throne speech and a budget in February and maybe a couple bills, and we pass that 6-month mark, and then the Green and the NDP collapse, and we would be headed to another election. So it's really about the start of this government and whether it can get off the ground. Everything after that, when it collapses, we go back to the polls.
Okay, that's certainly shaky and uncertain. Rob, thank you so much. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Rob Shaw, political reporter for Czech News, and he's a columnist as well, a political columnist for Radio West and All Points West. Let's take a call now. Peter is joining us at Cultus Lake. Hi, Peter.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, thanks. And I think you wanted to talk about, jump off of some of the points that you've heard already in the show, but what's your reaction to the election results, or inconclusive results at that?
Exactly. Well, my first response is that it would have been a different outcome had the NDP and the Greens worked together in some way. Because overall, their total was around 54% of the vote, so they are a majority. And what I would argue
44.6% of the vote.
Yeah, and 8.2 for the Greens.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see what you're saying. Total. Got you.
Yeah, so the combination, yeah. Mm-hmm. So they do represent the majority of British Columbians. On the other hand, the NDP has not been as proactive as they should be regarding the environment and the climate crisis. And so rather than splitting the progressive vote and giving the Tories a chance, and again, Rustad had said that the global warming is not real, he's a climate denier and all of that. So
well, it's real. He said it's real, but that he doesn't think it's a crisis.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I meant. The crisis is not real.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the smart thing to do for the environment and for healthcare and so on is for the Greens to essentially join with the NDP on the basis the NDP will have a more progressive environmental policy. For example, one of the things the Greens stressed, and it's a great idea, is to make public transit free. You get a lot of cars off the road. You get lower congestion. It helps people who are struggling financially, which is a huge problem in our province. And then you'd get a progressive government in that would do more than the NDP has actually done. And I think it would be better for Green supporters as well as NDP supporters.
Okay. Peter, thank you so much for the call.
Okay, thank you.
Good to hear from you in Cultus Lake. And we're taking your calls this hour in the wake of the election on Saturday, where the results are still inconclusive. Elections BC is going to continue or conduct its final tally this weekend, October 26th to 28th. And so we're asking you what your reaction is to the results so far anyway, as such as they are, and how you feel about this very thin margin that divided British Columbia, it seems, when it comes to the electorate. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Well, David Eby not doing interviews today, but Mosa Hoda is a former BC NDP cabinet minister, and he told CBC's The Early Edition he's confident that the NDP can once again work with the Greens.
We did it in 2017. We found common values with the Greens, and frankly, at times with the BC United or the BC Liberals at the time. You know, David Eby, he's pragmatic. He recognizes that there are areas that we have to do better in, but he also knows that people, whether it's business or individuals, want stability, and we're going to sit down with the parties. And obviously, particularly the Greens, and talk to them about some kind of arrangement that would bring stability and allow for good governance. And I think we can do it.
That's Mosa Hoda, former NDP cabinet minister, speaking on The Early Edition this morning. It's 12:26 now. You're with BC Today. We're asking you, what is your reaction to the BC election? And you can also email us at bctoday@cbc.ca. Lisa writes, I can't believe the Conservatives got so many votes from folks who talked to them. It was more they voted for something different. I hope the NDP wins and works with the Greens to pressure them a bit to do more in the areas they already are getting successful. Conservatives are only interested in bringing the NDP down, not working together. I'm crossing my fingers. Mike writes, in the absence of a proportional representation system, we got the best possible outcome. These guys need to work together. We need to ditch first past the post so that the only actual majorities or coalitions can govern. Sandy writes, the polarizing and divisive rhetoric from both sides will likely continue, and it makes me weep for BC. Why can't the parties just drop the gloves and find common ground to solve the urgent problems we face? Lorraine writes, I find it quite ironic Rustad has said climate change is not his priority, and so people are going to the polls in a very bad atmospheric river, one of the worst, and they are voting for Conservatives. Wow. And Bruce writes, I think that this is a dangerous time for the Greens. They might get the chance to help support an NDP government, but at some time in the future, the government will fall. If the polarization continues, more left-leaning voters will likely swing away from the Greens to support continuing the NDP government in the next election. In order to keep the Conservatives out of power, this could wipe the Greens from representation. Thanks for your opinions there. BC Today at cbc.ca. We'll continue to take your emails and calls.
Good afternoon. The two men facing first-degree murder charges in the death of Rapudaman Singh Malik entered guilty pleas in a New Westminster courtroom today. Tanner Fox and Jose Lopez pleaded to the lesser charge of second-degree murder. The Vancouver Sun is also reporting one of the men attacked the other inside the courtroom. Malik is best known as the man charged with mass murder and conspiracy in the Air India bombings. He was acquitted in 2005. Police in Coquitlam say the 57-year-old woman whose home was swept away by a mudslide during Saturday's torrential rain has been found dead. The RCMP say her body was found yesterday evening. They say it is a deeply tragic outcome, and the woman's family has been notified. Meanwhile, Environment Canada says the atmospheric river system over the weekend brought record-breaking rainfall to several communities. Records were set in places such as Victoria, Squamish, Vancouver, Abbotsford, and Hope. Environment Canada says Coquitlam recorded the Lower Mainland's highest rainfall total since Friday. with 256 millimeters. And now taking a look at the weather on the north coast, sunny this afternoon with a high of 7, highs around -4 with a chance of flurries in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of +1, highs to 13 with a few showers this afternoon in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, mainly cloudy with a high of 13 as well. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, cloudy with highs around 12 degrees. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Rob? Thanks, Rob.
You're welcome.
That's Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Welcome back. You're with BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Elliott. Thank you so much for joining us. It is the Monday after the BC election, and we are asking you for your reaction to the results that are still inconclusive right now. The NDP leading or elected in 46 seats. The Conservatives right behind with 45, both just short of the 47 seats required for a majority government. The BC Greens elected in 2, and that could prove to be crucial in whatever the outcome is. Based on preliminary results, CBC News has not projected the winners of 11 ridings, and in those, the margin is very slim. And Election BC will conduct a final tally on October 26th to the 28th. So we are sitting tight and waiting for final results here. Adam Olsen is the retiring Green Party MLA, and he spoke this morning on the Early Edition.
I think it's important just to recognize that what we saw at the end of this election was very similar to what we saw in 2017, a split electorate here in British Columbia. And now it's in front of every single one of those 93 individuals that got elected to form a government that works for British Columbians and to set aside the partisan differences that have been really polarizing in this election and find a way to govern. That's what British Columbians want.
That's Adam Olsen, retiring Green Party MLA. CBC did request an interview with Green Party leader Sonia Furstenau. She's not doing interviews right now. She lost in the riding of Victoria Beacon Hill to NDP incumbent Grace Lord. The Conservatives with 45 seats leading or elected there, the NDP leading or elected in 46, both just short of the 47 required for a majority government. The BC Greens elected in 2, and there are 11 ridings where CBC News has not projected yet. And in those ridings, the margin is under 2%. And so we are waiting for final results still. Those tallies will take place this weekend. And we're asking you for your reaction to the BC election this past Saturday. And how do you feel about those very tight margins? We knew this was going to be, or the polls told us that this was going to be a tight race. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. And you can email us to bctoday@cbc.ca. Anu is on the line from Delta. Hi, Anu.
Hi, can you hear me?
Sure can. Thanks so much for holding on the line. What's your reaction to the election?
So I have mixed feelings about it. I think for me, just some background, I've been voting every year since I was eligible to vote. And I can honestly say every time I've voted, I've never really voted with, yes, that's the person I want, that's the person I believe in, and I believe that they're going to do the greatest thing ever for the province. It's always been a battle of strategic voting, right? Who do I absolutely not want to see govern? And I was, I think, shocked at how much support there was for Conservatives. Just given some of the bizarre stuff their candidates were saying, the fact that their own leader on the night of the debate blatantly lied and said that he had seen somebody in dire straits on the corner of whatever intersection it was, but only for the coroner's office to say absolutely not, that hadn't taken place. For someone like that to lead a province, in my mind, just doesn't bode well. There were people who were calling themselves doctors within the Conservative Party. And, I mean, they're not going to look out for people. They're really only going to look out for developers and making the rich richer. So
there's one candidate who was there's a complaint about presenting themselves as a doctor, right? There was one.
I think it was Jody Tour.
That's right.
So she had ran in Surrey, and then that didn't work out. But my point being, I think like someone else has said, there's such a polarization within people, right? We're either just adamantly against the NDP or adamantly against the Conservatives. I think there's lessons to be drawn, and I'm happy that the outcome really is. It's going to have to be everyone has to collaborate because it's a lesson that we teach our kids all the time. And like someone said before, right, you need to govern for the betterment of the province. It doesn't matter about what your policies are. It's what do we need as a society right now. I know in Surrey, having grown up there, I'm not surprised. It was a hot topic. I'm a mom now, so I know that, SOGI is, in my opinion, the right thing to do because it's all about inclusivity. That's what we want to teach our kids. But it's created a whole other layer of bullying for little kids. And that's where I think the problems are coming from. You've got kids who are tomboys, right? And so girls are running around and playing, and you've got kids saying to them, hey, you must be a boy because you're playing with trucks and you're climbing up trees. So let's not call you your name, let's call you a boy name. And those girls come home crying tearfully to their moms and dads going, this is what's happening, right? And a lot of those parents are making a direct correlation between now, SOGI, and now these kids are trying to say, hey, you're not a girl. You don't identify as a girl. It's because you play with these toys. These kinds of things, I think, have created a huge swing for Conservatives, but they also don't know what they're talking about. Having listened to some of them, I've been here, I've lived here my whole life. Some of them don't know the difference between what is under MSP and what is under dentistry, for example, right? And the last thing I'll say is I had my second baby last year. I talked to Ravi Kahlon. I respect him immensely, and I think that the NDP, in my opinion, have eloquent speakers, competent individuals who can run the province. I don't believe Restad himself as a leader. And I mean, they elected in South Surrey Chapman, who has said horrendous things about people. But you know what? People chose to elect him, so it tells me that people in that riding are also, they're very hateful, and that's very disappointing. But going back to my point about giving birth last year at Surrey Memorial Hospital, I saw firsthand just how horrible it was. You had people in triage who were actively in labor, and that is not something that should be happening here in Canada. My mom gave birth to me 30-some-odd years ago. Her experience was vastly different. They had a one-on-one ratio with nurses. I would have loved to have that, even with my first child, who I had during COVID. But I have a lot of respect for the nurses. And I think the problem really isn't about making another hospital. It's about actually taking the funds that end up, for some reason, in Vancouver Coastal, where the population is not growing. That money needs to be siphoned into the Fraser Health, where the population is growing. That still doesn't happen, and that's on AG and Dix to fix that.
You've talked about a lot of the issues that have gone through your mind. When it comes to how you voted, what outcome would you like to see? Then you talked about how this may be the best outcome in terms of people having to work together.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was the commentator that you have. I really hope David Eby finds a way to work with the Greens. I think they do have the most common ground that they can actually have a productive conversation to do something with. Like I said, it would just be, I don't know how there's going to be any governing if the Conservatives come in. I can just see the next 4 years just being an absolute hot mess. I don't know if anything's going to get done.
Thank you very much. really good to hear from you and hear your thought process on this. That's a new calling from Delta. I will clarify that in Langley Willowbrook, Jody Tour, the Conservative candidate, is elected there in the riding of Langley Willowbrook. Taking your calls, asking you what your reaction is to the election and how you feel about the thin margin between the two main parties and what you think, what outcome you would like to see. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Let's go up to Fort St. John now, and Ben is on the line. Hi there, Ben.
Hi, how are you today?
I am well. Thanks so much for calling.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome. Just on the election results, I was telling your producer there before I got online that I'm actually quite struck by how pronounced the regional urban-rural divide has become.
Yeah, is it that surprising?
Election.
Is it that surprising when it comes to, you look at the map and it's blue all throughout the interior and the north, and then orange closer to the coast, with the exception of around the Revelstoke area. But is that that surprises you?
Yeah, well, I mean, it has been that trend, not just in BC, but I think in a lot of provinces. I know Alberta is a lot the same way too. But your producer did point out that even though it was, very pronounced, very conservative and rural, and a little bit more progressive in the urban centers, that there were still a lot of close races. When there was 10 or 12,000 votes cast, the margin of victory wasn't by 10,000 votes in a lot of cases. It was by 1,000 or 2,000 votes, which tells me that the issues that I think we all agree are important. I think we can agree on what issues need to be addressed. I think what the fundamental difference is how do we go about fixing the problems? And I know that governments form committees all the time, to study issues and to study problems, but they're not very transparent, and they don't really tell the public a lot about what's going on behind the scenes. And I think that if I think in order to make progress on all the major issues that we've got in BC, is both sides are going to have to start giving meaningful concessions on some of the issues that divide us. Which gets back to the collaboration type of idea, which doesn't seem to be working too well these days. But I think if it was transparent and the public could see that, it is too ideological, it'll put pressure on the politicians to maybe really start working together.
Interesting. And you talked about the urban-rural divide. Is that what you're referring to? Some kind of committee to a joint committee of MLAs from rural areas and urban areas?
Yes, but not just a committee to have a yell fest. But let's form an environmental committee, but made up of rural and urban people, or rural and urban MLAs. Because the issues on how to solve the problem in the rural regions are completely different than the urban region. But it seems that if it's a committee dominated by say government people or the people that are in power, a lot of the voices aren't heard. Somebody living in Fort St. John that spends $300 a week on fuel to go to and from work, their issues are a lot different than people that take the bus in Vancouver, right?
You have hit the nail on the head there when it comes to the differences in, of the issues and how they play out for people, depending on where they live, Ben. Thank you so much for the call.
You bet.
Really good to hear from you. I like that line. Not just people yelling at each other. That's Ben in Fort St. John. Asking you for your reaction to the BC election and how you feel about the tight margin between the two parties. It's really, when it comes to the vote share, the popular vote, it really is, 46.5 versus 43 45.5 versus 44.5. It's really just within a percentage point. I'll get you the correct one. It's 44.6 versus the Conservatives with 43.6. So it really is tight. What does that say about what British Columbians are thinking right now and where we are at? Our numbers, 1-800-825-5950. 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. And some emails too. bctoday@cbc.ca is our address. Scott writes, I think we need to consider a compulsory voting system similar to what they have in Australia. My understanding is that only 57% of the electorate chose to cast a ballot. That isn't enough, especially as the population ages in BC. We are going to continue to see deadlock elections like this in the future if this trend continues. We did see record numbers of advanced voting in this election, however. Anders writes, the NDP did not state what their accomplishments were. I needed an MRI pre-NDP, and the wait was 1.6 years. A year after the NDP got in, I needed another. It took 2 weeks. I'm also concerned that nothing matters now. And Ken writes, in 2022, Canada's exports to China amounted to $25 billion. And the big ticket items were coal, crude oil, and iron and copper ore. On the other hand, we imported over $65 billion in manufactured products. We've effectively gifted our economic future to China. Thank you very much for your emails, bctoday@cbc.ca. Let's take another call now. Ellis is on the line in Callista. Hi, Ellis.
Hi, it's actually Ellen, and it's Callista. It's a tiny, tiny town on the North Shore.
My apologies, Ellen, my apologies. I've always said Callista, but it's Callista. Okay, thank you for that correction.
Yes, I just wanted to mention I'm very disappointed in how the election went. For me, the main issue is that people, I felt, voted for labels. They went either to the left or to the right. None of these parties actually have a solution for the problems we are dealing with right now. For me, the most important thing would be our medical system and the wildfires. And both of it was not really approached by both of these big parties in a way that I can support it. I was hoping we would get more independents in. There were a few which really had solutions and good ideas. I just like more variety. I don't like just two parties. And like I said, I don't see any of these parties solving the issues. And people tend to vote as they have voted for years. It would be nice to see a little bit more interest in what these parties stand for and get more involved in politics and actually go voting.
That's really interesting, and I want to ask you a little bit more about those independents, Ellen, because there were five. There was a record number of independent candidates, but in terms of incumbents, there were the five who were BC United MLAs and ran independent. None of them were elected in. Tell me a bit more about why you think, why you wish that more independents had been, or an independent had been elected.
I would like to see more different opinions. I don't like these two-party system. I like to have more people, more opinions, working together, finding a solution for the problems. I don't like either left or right.
That polarization.
Like I said, yeah, the polarization, and I do not like that the health system. I think it got lost a little bit in this whole thing. For me, that is one of the most important things. And all this talk about the carbon tax, for heaven's sake, it's a carbon tax. It's not the end of the world. It was something which it started as a mole and it went to be a mountain. It was just making too much out of it. We need a lot of money for all the areas where we had the wildfires, like Cellista burned down last year. There is so much more coming up our way with issues for the environment. If it's water, if it's fire, we need the money, and we need money to pay for a healthcare system. And I think that got lost.
Ellen, good to hear from you. Very good to hear from you in Salista. All the best. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Tim is next in Kamloops. Hi, Tim. What's your reaction to the election?
It wasn't really surprising. I think that issues such as healthcare, especially in rural areas with the closing of ERs, may have played a significant factor. But then again, it's not just a provincial issue. This is a national issue, because it seemed to me that's what happened to the Conservatives in Manitoba under Heather Stephenson. She got defeated by Wab Kinew. But one of the things I think right now, you're not going to see what the parties are going to want to say until they find out what the results are. And what I was saying to your screener, a good example, as somebody who's lived here all of his life and has found, is the issue of the residential tenancy branch. When you have a right-of-center party, such as the Socreds or BC Liberals, they would shut them down. I remember in '83 under the Socreds where they butchered the rentalsmen. Rafe Mayer even said himself. And then, of course, when the NDP come in, they reestablish these offices. And I think as issues like that, the Greens should really question the Conservatives on that and the NDP. But I don't think anybody is going to let their agenda out until the results are known. Thanks.
Tim, thanks so much for the call. Really good to hear from you as well. Lots of emails coming in. I'll put the phone numbers out again in our last 10 minutes of the show here, taking your reaction. Really the first time to be able to talk here about the results of the BC election insofar as they are right now. Again, inconclusive at the moment, very tight. The NDP leading or elected in 46 seats. The Conservatives with 45. The BC Greens elected in 2. And Elections BC says a final tally will take place October 26th to the 28th. There are 11 ridings where CBC News has not projected the winners yet. The NDP leading in 6 of those, the Conservatives in 5, but the margins are very tight right now. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. And lots of emails coming in. Trevor writes, I wanted to speak to what drug policy might look like with the current government. I have concerns about the alignments the NDP took during the election with Conservative positions for the forced treatment model. However, a fragile alliance with the Greens could pull them into a more reasonable position. We have an illicit drug market that needs to be addressed, and you can't sweep the streets to solve this problem. There isn't even access to voluntary beds. The Greens had a more progressive stance on drugs, and hopefully they hold the government accountable. Nathan writes, the polarization will continue to progress until the feds regulate how tech conglomerates push content on users. Michael writes, I think the Green Party should ally itself with a party that promises its first bill will be for proportional representation voting. Nancy writes, although I'm not shocked with the election outcome, I'm disappointed by John Rustad's large win in his riding. This would be the Chaco Lakes. Local press reported on the closures of lumber mills, his lack of presence in affected towns, and the NDP candidate did seem strong. The current state of forestry in BC continues to impact the entire province, and I can only hope both parties work together on forestry, which is important for all British Columbians. Eric writes, BC has done almost nothing for small landlords across the province. In the past years, especially after the pandemic and cost of living skyrocketed, most of the policies created by the governments are to protect renters instead of landlords. That's an interesting email following our last call there. Again, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. Greg is calling us from Vancouver. Hi, Greg.
Hi, how are you today?
Very well. Thanks for calling. What's your reaction to the election?
My reaction, I'd like to put things in a little bit of historical perspective, where the centre-right coalition in BC was usually wins our provincial elections, and it's only when they become unpopular that the NDP wins. For example, Dave Barrett or Glenn Clark, Harcourt, and then the last one in 2017. And so historically, the center-right coalition would get the higher popular vote and the number of seats to go along with it. And what surprised me about this one is if the Conservatives were really popular, they would have gotten a higher popular vote. I think that his popular vote is similar to Christy Clark's in 2017 when she was very unpopular. So I'm thinking that the results show a distrust or a dislike or an unknowingness about the Conservatives so far. And the high NDP popular vote still shows a confidence in Dave Eby. And that's how I think it goes. And when a new election is called, those 5 seats where the independents are running, I think those will go Tory most likely.
Go Tory most likely. Okay. Greg, thank you so much for that. So to you, it's about, is it about the popularity of the leader?
Oh, boy. In this election, yes, I think so. It was popular in the leader. Plus the policies, plus general disenfranchisement, but also in this election, the leader played a big part because a lot of people are uncertain about the Tory leader, I think.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Greg, thank you so much for the call. That's Greg in Vancouver. Our number again, 1-800-825-5950. 604-669-3733. Just a few minutes left here. Lots of emails coming in too, and let me just go through some of them here with you now as I pull them up. Okay, we've got one from David in Burnaby who writes, I really hope there is an NDP government with the BC Green Party holding the balance of power. I would like to see the Green Party demand that the NDP keep the carbon tax but return it to the revenue neutral format that Gordon Campbell's BC Liberals enacted. In this way, those people and businesses that cut their carbon emissions will come out ahead. And another email here now. Kath writes from Vancouver, considering the heavy rainfall and wind warnings, some people decided to stay in rather than go out and vote. Anyone walking has to have pretty good protective clothing in weather. I think if the weather had been normal, a lot more people would have stepped out to vote. And Kathy writes, and would have voted NDP given the party's support of seniors and low-income people. And trying to get more emails here for you. bctoday@cbc.ca is our address, of course. And I've got another one from Michael who writes, I think what the result shows is how divided we are as a province. In my riding of Columbia River Revelstoke, the BC NDP candidate, Andrea Dunlop, lost by 714 votes. In my town of Revelstoke, the city population overwhelmingly voted for the BC NDP with 56% of the votes. While we may see the rural divide on the election map, it does not represent population centers like Revelstoke, Golden, and Kimberley in my riding. These populations voted BC NDP. My hope for the future is a BC NDP Green Coalition allowing John Rustad, BC Green Coalition. People don't realize how dangerous a Conservative government may be. Privatization of ICBC, all these crown corporations are very successful. Thank you for your email. And again, it's bctoday@cbc.ca. Lots of reaction coming in. We'll continue to take them for you and, of course, follow every development on the election results. You can keep emailing us, though, bctoday@cbc.ca.